Welcome back. I'm Trina Wilcox, and today's guest on the Tell Me More for Run Radio podcast is Jessica Foster. And you're here with Neurology of Presence, and you're going to tell us all things neurological. I'm excited I'm excited for you to pick my brain and tell me a little bit about all this stuff that you know all about.
Awesome. I'm so glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So, how'd you get involved in this?
It's a good question. I'm a performer, a musical theater performer, and I was tired of waiting tables to make an income. And I actually got certified in Pilates to
Okay.
kind of
Yes.
stop that happening. And then moved to New York. And my singing teacher had another student who was doing this Z Health for Singers workshop. And I had been using the Pilates to help performers kind of stay embodied. It did help me vocally. So this was interesting. I was like, well, what is this? I don't even know what
Mm-hmm.
Z Health is. And so I went, and in 45 minutes of doing some really weird things, my voice like shifted into whole new ways. My biggest complaint had been performance anxiety. I would feel like I would just vacate my body anytime I was in an important audition, which isn't very useful. And the next day, I actually had had an audition, went in saying a really difficult piece effortlessly. They asked for yet another really difficult piece. I was able to do it. I was like, I don't know what this is, but I need more of it.
Right.
um, and so I actually ended up going through the full Z Health curriculum. Z Health they're an education company that has Dr. Cobb is the founder of it, and he is a genius at taking cutting edge neuroscience and making it applicable for everyday people. It was initially targeted for elite athletes and elite
Okay.
athletic trainers. So I think I didn't get the stats on this last Olympics we had, but the one prior, I think there were like 74 athletes using Z Health techniques, and I think there were 7 trainers there. So
Wow.
it's happening.
Okay.
We've had like major football trainers in courses, and like word is spreading, especially around Europe. It's really taken off, and it's still sort of not not as known here, although it is becoming more popular. But the gist of it is like looking at the body instead of just as muscles and skeleton and even like the endocrine system or any of these isolated pieces. If you look at it through the lens of the nervous system, you start to get a much more holistic approach. So
Okay.
this idea that anything I do impacts everything,
Right.
which is somewhat intuitive, but then when you actually start to apply the science, it becomes almost magical feeling. Like it's just kind of like, wait, what? I did this
Okay.
random thing and my range of motion improved. What do you mean? It's just,
Okay.
but yeah, I mean, it's that. So yes, I got into it from this performing place, and I ended up going through the curriculum with my vocal coach Andrew Byrne, who is an elite singing coach in New York. And he's now single-handedly revolutionizing the vocal industry with this information, which is really cool. So I was able to sort of apply it for performers, which was great. And I'd say most of my clients at this point are people who have fallen through the cracks of the medical system. They know something's wrong, but they can't either get a diagnosis, or the diagnosis is you have a syndrome. Um, good luck.
Thanks.
So,
Exactly.
um, and and yeah, Z Health kind of has labeled the idea of neuroplasticity, right? This
Yes.
idea that our brain is and always is changing,
Mm-hmm.
um, as the science of hope. Because if you can make a change in the brain, then you can make a change in your experience of life. And so
Okay.
you just never know where the inroad is going to come from.
Uh-huh.
And because some of this is still quite new science, most of us haven't had access to these potential inroads that could be game changing. So
Okay.
it's been extremely fun. I've been doing this for 9 years now, and yeah, it does feel like magic sometimes. Oh, they got all the studies to back it up. It's science.
Okay. Okay. Now, I'm interested in what it could help me with as an athlete. As you and I had discussed, you saw the podcast, the Fit Cat feature on COVID and long COVID, that I am struggling with that. Some of my fellow community runners are struggling with this, and it's devastating. And you were thinking maybe applying some of this science can help. So
Yes.
that is intriguing to me. So, what can you tell me that might help some of us in that situation?
Yes. So we don't, I'll just put a caveat out there, like we're still figuring these things out with COVID. It's all brand new.
Sure.
And I am not a doctor.
Right.
Put that caveat out there too. Um, But what I do know is how to work with the vagus nerve.
Okay.
And what they're seeing, I read an article recently that said, I think it was like 100% of the people in the study that they were looking at had some form of vagal abnormality. Because the vagus nerve does so many things. It's called the wander, like the vagus nerve for vagary. It wanders all through our body, and it essentially connects our viscera to our brain. Because it has all of these different functions, the symptoms can look extremely different from person to person.
Okay.
That's why there's some people that have like impacts of speech. It can be impacts in breathing. It can be digestive issues. It can be all of these things anywhere on the path that are showing up as a symptom. It's also the start or the driver in some ways of the parasympathetic nervous system, so your rest and digest system. So if it's having issues and you're not getting enough of the parasympathetic tone, then your sympathetic tone is going to be out of balance, right?
Okay.
And so we all have our own trademark things that happen to us when we're stressed. We all have our pain signatures. And one thing I have kind of noticed with people I've seen dealing with COVID is it seems to enhance in some ways, in some cases, things that were already there. It just made them worse.
Right.
So when we work with the vagus nerve, we are, yes, increasing that parasympathetic drive. So hopefully it's just calming everything down from sort of a very global perspective. But it also can directly get in and target some of these areas that may be specifically impacted by whatever is happening within the vagus nerve as a result of COVID. Does that make sense?
I think so.
But there's like specific ways we can work with it. There's also a global piece.
Okay. So what are some of the things that we can do? What can I do right now that's going to help me?
So
it's been a long time coming.
This has been a long time. I sent you a list of fun things that must have seemed very strange.
You did.
So the vagus nerve starts, you can think about it in terms of access points. We have access to it in the ears. We have access to it on the tongue, in the throat, breathing, and then anything in the abdomen is sort of fair game. Okay. So I kind of was thinking we'd start from the top.
Okay.
Like just start with the tongue.
Okay.
So there are, I teach a whole like series of tongue exercises, and everyone's a little bit different with this.
Okay.
Just to kind of give you a sense though of like how this works or how I hold this, I assess something for anybody, like, and then we do a drill and then we reassess it because I want to know in real time, is this something your nervous system likes, or is it bored with it? That would sort of be like a neutral response, like I don't really care, or did it create more threat in your nervous system? In which case we don't want to do more of that. But we don't want to wait 2 to 6 weeks to reassess whether or not you're getting benefits. Okay. So you can talk to your nervous system. And to me, this is like the coolest thing about what I do is this ability to really assess anything you're trying and go, oh my gosh, that really did work for me. Or that seemed to make things worse. That's interesting information. Doesn't necessarily mean I don't want to do it, depending on what it is, but I need to look at it, or this is not a good use of my time. It's boring for my nervous system. So I don't know, of the toys or the things I put on the list, what caught your attention the most? I'm curious.
Okay, I've got a butter knife, a paper towel, a paper bag, and I'm sitting in a chair that
in the swivel chair.
The swivel chair.
Great.
So, I mean.
Okay, great. So let's just see if we can find a quick and easy assessment for you to use
on
your body, and then we'll do the drill, and then we'll redo that assessment and see, yes, my nervous system liked it, or no, it didn't. Does that sound good?
Okay.
So do you have like, with Zoom, we're doing this call on Zoom, like I often use my neck range of motion as an assessment because I have tension there.
Okay, yes, it just cracked.
Okay, you got some tightness there?
Always.
Great, okay, good. Then we'll see if we can shift that. Okay. So again, this isn't a direct piece of what's going on for you with long COVID, although for me, anytime something's going wrong, my neck gets tight. So, but we're going to use it as a marker of like the global piece of the nervous system. Okay. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Okay, great. So between the paper towel, the butter knife, and the swivel chair, which one is most interesting to you?
The butter knife. Okay,
great. Perfect. So here's why we're going to use a butter knife. This is actually, I want you to think we're going to do weightlifting with your tongue right now. Okay. So the vagus nerve activates the back of the throat and parts of the tongue. So if we give the tongue some sensory information, or in this case, we're actually going to drive motor function, sometimes we can create enough firing of the vagus nerve to get an impact. So
Okay.
for this, I want you to stick your tongue out into the butter knife, and you're going to push your tongue out of your mouth as far as you can with a little bit of resistance against that knife. Does that make sense? Can you feel those muscles working? Mine's a little unstable feeling. I should probably do this more often. And then relax for a second. And then we're going to do it again. Really seeing if you can push from the back of the tongue, because that's where most of the vagal connections are. And then relax. And do it one more time. And then relax. And then let's check your neck again. We'll reassess. Any change?
Maybe a little.
A little bit? Okay, great. Let's actually grab the paper towel.
Okay.
We're going to do, that was sort of an activation of the tongue. Now we're going to give it a big bolus of sensory information. We're going to pull the tongue out of the mouth. This is going to be a tongue stretch.
Okay.
So I'm using the paper towel because our tongues are like slippery slugs and they're really hard to grab. So I'm going to take my tongue and pull it as far out of my mouth as possible. And you might feel the stretch underneath your tongue initially. That's okay.
I feel it in the back.
You feel it in the back. Great.
Yeah.
Okay, good. So just hold that. I'm going to entertain you here for a minute so you get a decent dose of this. Yeah. So again, we've got all of these vagal connections back there. So this stretch, as like unpleasant as it can feel initially, can actually start to drive that rest and digest system. It can help in terms of like neck tension. If that tongue is if it's moving better, it can help with the neck stability and not have us hold too much tension in our neck. And it is actually, because it's you're retesting your neck. Oh, that looks better.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're getting significantly further to the right.
I can't tell if it's just because I'm doing the side to side or if that's helping. So how many seconds or how long should you pull the tongue?
I usually have people start with a minute, whether they
can
get there.
Okay. I mean, it really does when you're actually doing a pull and you're pulling it tight. It really, you can feel that. It's not really comfortable.
It's not really comfortable. Nope.
So what is that doing for the muscles in my neck?
Two things in this case. One, the reason I was having you do it was to, in a sense, like fire up some of the vagal nerve activation. But then also the tongue is deeply connected to the muscles of the neck.
Okay.
There's actually, speaking of all of this is something I feel like is one of my giant public service announcements.
Okay.
If I'm talking to you right now, where's your tongue? Where does it live? Where's home base for your tongue?
No, now I'm concentrating on it, so I'm not.
Now I try and distract you for a second. But
kind of just the sides rest, kind of touching
where?
My teeth.
The bottom jaw, the top teeth.
Top.
Good. So it's kind of relaxed between the top molars. Is that what you're feeling, or just like it's resting?
Or it's like kind of on the top roof of my mouth, maybe.
Okay, good. That's actually where it should be. Mine, when I found this out, it was like a dead sea creature on the bottom.
Really? Okay.
And I'm a singer. I'm a trained singer. This was like, I mean, it was horrifying, but yes. So for anybody listening whose tongue may not be in the correct place, and even if it is close to the correct place, we can actually improve it and still get a positive reassessment from it.
Okay.
So the tip of the tongue, if you slide your tongue back from the top teeth, the back of the top teeth, there's a little ridge. Can you feel that? That's the alveolar ridge. If the tongue is on it or even slightly behind it, that's where that should belong. And then the rest of it should be suctioned up to the roof of your mouth. Great. Can you swallow with your tongue in that position?
Yes.
Great. Perfect. Give it as much activation as you can, because you're one of the few people I've actually talked to where it's actually really in the right spot. But so your listeners may be struggling with this.
Okay.
With your tongue in that position, can you check your neck again? Actually, that went further. So even just a little bit of awareness, potentially you've got a little bit of range of motion. For anybody that's struggling with this, you can actually call what I call the cheesy grin. If you lift your eyebrows and smile, it can help keep the tongue in that position. And
okay.
Useful for kind of training it and giving it a bit of a load. And you can practice swallowing there. It just is an easier way of getting there. I will say that the tongue position for me, once I corrected it, and I had to work on it for a while. It's not like I had, it just instantaneously stayed there. I had to kind of consciously remind myself that the tongue should be there. So the back of the tongue is innervated by the vagus nerve. If it's not suctioned up there, then 24 hours we're missing
Mhm.
a giant dose of vagal stimulation that the brain knows it should be receiving.
Okay.
So for me, getting it up there, my anxiety levels dropped from like an 8 to a 4
Mm.
almost instantaneously. It took about 3 months for my tongue to kind of get trained to stay there.
Yeah.
But that made a huge difference for me in just about everything, because that anxiety is obviously driving so many other things. She wants to play with. She's got her paper bag. Okay,
So other than breathing into it,
that's what we're gonna do. We are gonna breathe
we
into
are.
it. Is that
Just
is
like
that
the old fashioned? Are you serious?
I am totally serious.
Okay.
Yes.
So you
So
cover
we're
the nose? I
cover
forget.
the nose. We're gonna seal it around your mouth and nose. We're switching gears here from tongue talk to breathing. So this to me is useful for a couple of reasons. One, breathing there's a huge part of it that's dictated by the vagus nerve. And so we are doing some vagal stimulation with this. But also, if we can increase the carbon dioxide levels in our body, I know that sounds counterproductive, but most of us actually, to some extent or another, hyperventilate. Are you feeling a little breathless there?
No, I love I love how that feels. I am
Okay.
one of those people that have gotten myself so upset that I have hyperventilated. Now, I remember watching this on movies or TV shows, but I'm like, I've never thought to actually grab one and do it.
Right.
My husband one time gave me this when I was so upset, and it worked.
Oh
I
my
was,
gosh, you actually have an experience of it. That's amazing.
yeah.
Yes, totally.
But then I thought I had read somewhere not to do that. So I hadn't done it since.
Well, it's one of these subjects that's like confusing because our brain needs oxygen.
Right.
But if you have too much oxygen, if I'm sucking air
right.
in,
When
it becomes toxic.
Right. Right.
The other part of it is if I don't have enough carbon dioxide on board, I can't actually absorb the oxygen that I'm breathing in. So you need the carbon dioxide to get the oxygen to the brain. So that's I know there's schools of thought that are like extremely focused on oxygen, and they probably have some thoughts about bag breathing. For me, like this was really, really helpful. And not just when I'm hyperventilating. Like I don't experience hyperventilation. I have a couple times. I have a couple stories in my life, but like for the most part, I kind of feel like I'm holding my breath all the time. So I wouldn't have thought I was a candidate for that until I started realizing, yeah, I hold my breath and then I gasp.
Yes. Now I will often not feel like I'm getting a deep cleansing breath and have trouble with that. So
yeah. So this can really help with that. I was doing it 3 to 5 times a day when I first got into Z Health. It was again another habit I kind of had to create. I would do it before getting on the subway. I had major motion sickness that was part of my symptomology, but so I just tied it to that and it worked well. Funny story, I was breathing into a bag one time on the New York subway platform, and this man came up and was like, "Can I have some?" I was like, yes,
sure.
yes, you can.
Nice.
Have at it. But the other thing is, so we all know we're supposed to be able to take deep breaths and our breathing should be relaxed. And that's a nice thing. But for me, I had a really hard time consciously shifting that. This actually starts to, on a slightly pH level, although it's still slight, but it starts to have an impact from sort of I'll say a cellular level, where it under the radar starts to shift your breathing pattern. Also, the carbon dioxide it's a vasodilator. So if you are dealing with inflammation, which from my perspective and what I've read from COVID, we are all talking about inflammation of something. And so the carbon dioxide in theory can help decrease the inflammation, which could then reduce symptoms, whatever your symptoms are.
Interesting.
Does that all make sense?
Nothing around COVID makes sense, but yes, I understand what you're trying to say.
Yes.
Okay.
Agreed.
So one last thing. Do you want to try the spinny chair?
Yes. So we've talked tongue, we've talked breathing.
Right.
And now I'm going to actually target your vestibular system.
Okay.
So your inner ear.
Oh, right. Okay. And
this I'm going to do for 2 reasons. One, there are some connections between the vestibular system and the vagus nerve. And that matters. They do impact each other for sure. But the vestibular system is a key, like, this is kind of how I think about it. We take in, let's say we take in 100% sensory information. 30% of it actually comes from like our experience in our bodies, like proprioceptive movement, right? The other 80%, or that's not math, 70% comes from predominantly your vision, but then
Okay.
also your vestibular system.
Okay.
So this is a system most of us don't think about very often. I certainly didn't know what the word vestibular meant until I got into Z Health and started learning about these things. I came to find out I had a pretty strong deficit in my vestibular system, and that's what was causing the motion sickness.
Okay.
So we're going to use it sort of as a, yes, potentially we're driving more parasympathetic tone, assuming it's appropriate for your nervous system. And it can be if we can clean up any deficits that may be happening. And by that, I mean, like, we're going to have you spin in a chair, which is going to impact the vestibular system, which lives inside the little organs that live inside your inner ear. If there are any issues in that area and we clean them up, that can be a huge reduction in what I kind of call the overall threat in your nervous system. So you're, in a sense, increasing your capacity to do life before you get whatever your symptom is. Does that make sense?
Okay. Yeah.
We're just going to, like, my work as a neuroperformance coach, which is what I call myself, is basically to come in and actually play with the wiring of your nervous system and get rid of any deficits that may be in the nervous system itself, so that we're reducing the amount of stress you experience in the world before you even walk out the door. Life is stressful enough, but if my eyes and my inner ear, my tongue aren't working quite right, it becomes that much harder to navigate.
Okay.
So that's what we're going to do.
Okay.
So let's check your neck again to see where we're at with that.
Awesome. Tightening back up a little.
Tightening back up a little bit. Okay.
Okay.
So I'm going to have you, are you attached to wires?
I am, the headphones, and then I've got my computer under here so I can slide back a little bit.
Can you do a full rotation on a chair?
Not without taking my headphones off.
You want to try and take your headphones off and just
spin
one and put them back
Just
on?
how many times do you want me to spin?
Let's just do one.
Okay. And I'm back.
She's back.
I'm back.
Any dizziness with that?
Maybe.
Did that tighten up?
Maybe. I don't know. I really don't notice a difference.
You don't notice a difference. It looks tighter to me.
Yeah.
Did you feel dizzy at all?
No.
Okay. You can do this with your headphones on, I think. Can you just go rotate halfway?
Yeah.
Stop there. Then check your, oh yeah, that was much better. Can you tell that?
About the same.
About the same? Okay.
Yeah.
Do you want to go for 2 spins and see what happens?
Yeah, hold on.
So if you have dizziness, wait.
What was that?
If you have dizziness, wait till the dizziness stops, because that can be threatening, and then check your neck and see what the impact is.
It's okay. I don't really know that that's doing much for me.
Nope, I don't know that it is either.
Yeah.
So with running,
yes,
you don't do a ton of rotation. I mean, there's a little bit, but not much. But you're mainly moving forward,
right?
Which is a different part of the vestibular anatomy. It's the utricle, measures forward and backward or side to side movement. So we could try rolling your chair forward and backwards. Although
I'm on carpet.
You're on carpet.
Yeah, it won't work.
It won't move so much.
No.
The other thing running is obviously there's some up and down pieces to it, which might be easier to kind of check.
Yeah.
How do you feel about squats?
Wow. Okay.
You didn't know you were getting a workout today.
I didn't know I was doing a workout. How many squats you want out of me?
5. If they feel good. Yep. No pain. If it hurts, stop.
Get my room here. Okay. All right, we doing neck check now?
Yeah, although to be scientific, you'd probably want to sit back down, but do you notice anything?
Oh. That did more than the chair did.
That did more than the chair.
I think so, yeah. Yeah.
I from my eyes, it kind of looked like the chair tightened you up a little bit.
Yeah.
So to me, this is interesting, right? Like, all of it is information. That may be that it was too threatening. It may be that and that was why I had you do, like, I broke it into half, which then
Yeah.
just was fairly neutral. So I
Yeah.
don't know, maybe a three-quarter revolution, but we can get really specific with it.
Hmm.
The point that I think is really important to recognize is, like, the vestibular system plays such a big role in how we feel, that it's worth kind of thinking about it. And yes, I do training, right? Like specific training that's targeted for each individual nervous system. And there are things that most of us, I think about it in terms of like play. If we do a sport, it tends to be we're running in one direction,
Yeah.
or we're like, very, unless you're doing like lacrosse or something, getting rotation in. Um, is really important, and sometimes is a deficit in our lifestyle.
Hmm.
So if you have a spinny chair, periodically just kind of getting that in there and keeping the vestibular system active can be important for anybody. But what was I've lost my train of thought there. Vestibular system. Hold that thought. Okay, so you can edit this out, right? You were
I do want to go back to the just neuroplasticity in
yes,
general. What
yes.
I've what I've read and got out of it, it's a lot about brain training. Is that correct? Kind of putting, for example, good thoughts on repeat and trying to get your brain to change that habit of negativity bias and things like that.
Mm.
So is that kind of, I guess, essentially too, you're doing different exercises just to kind of play with the wiring and rewire it to, just have a more efficient lifestyle?
Yeah, it was a really great question. So yes, I think the pop culture narrative on neuroplasticity is sort of this thought mantra, and that's all really useful. But our
Yeah.
cortical thought, like what we're conscious of, is such a small percentage of what's going on, which
Yeah.
you don't really realize until you get sick or something happens where you're like, wait, this just doesn't feel good, and you
Right.
can't think yourself out of it necessarily.
Yes. And that's the frustration about a lot of that. It's like, well, just, think it out, think it out. It's like, I want to think it out. I can't to think this out.
Yeah, it can be extremely frustrating. And so I like to think of this as we're getting under the hood of the car, we're
Uh-huh.
going below cognition, and we're playing with all of these sensory receptors. um, the In terms of how neuroplasticity works with this work,
Hmm.
we are always changing, right? The brain is always laying down new neural networks to support what we're asking it to do.
Okay.
So if it's a total use it or lose it system. Um, it's calorically expensive to have neural pathways, so we're very efficient. If we're not going to use it, we're going to get rid of it. But that can be extremely detrimental if we're getting rid of something that's imperative for other things. Um, so looking at the basics of, can I move my eyes well? We think about vision as this static thing where we're staring at a Snellen chart and can you get to 2020? Well, our
Hmm.
eyes should be able to move. Our head should be able to move without our eyes moving. We should be able to jump from target to target. There's a bunch of different visual skills that, like, most people, when you actually start to look at this, have deficits in because we don't know to practice it. And because our world has gotten smaller and smaller and smaller, and we are constantly staring at small things, we're getting worse. So that's a big part of it. The vestibular system too. Am I moving my body through multiple planes of the world? If I'm not, I may start to experience some deficits. Proprioceptively, am I moving? Do I know how to move all of my joints through their full range of motion at every speed? It's an infinite potential of improvement, is how I kind of look at it. And you just never know, like, what someone's golden nugget is going to be. There
Hmm.
are some of these specifics that I want to make sure everybody knows. Like, yes, your tongue should be in that place. I mean, that's
Hmm.
been game changing for so many people that, like, it just needs to be said. Yeah, that. So from like a kind of a public perspective, yes, like getting out there and continually telling my brain that I want to interact fully with the world
Hmm.
around me is the best medicine that I can share on a podcast, right?
Right.
And then we can get really specific with your receptors. I do a full like neural flow, and we look and we're like, hey, did you know you can't smell anything through that nostril? That's a problem. That's threatening for your brain, right? And the more of those deficits we have, the more threat kind of lives in our nervous system, and our capacity to show up for life decreases. So we start to improve those, then our capacity starts to increase again.
Okay, where can people come up to go to find out more and get a session with you so they can dive deeper into this?
Yes. I'm very active on Instagram,
Okay.
Jessica Brown Foster, trying to continually explain these things through infotainment.
Yes.
um, and then I have a newsletter that I write weekly. If you go to my website, neurologyofpresence.com, there's a subscribe link there. So you can click that and get a weekly pontification on
Okay.
my thoughts on neurology and life. And I think that's it. Yeah, the website and the Instagram should do it.
All right. I'm going to make sure that I'm following those. You are welcome to come back. This has been so much fun. If you want to come back, we can talk more about that. I think we could do this all day. So thank
Oh
you
yes,
so
I
much for
definitely could.
thank you so much for sharing your knowledge.
Oh, thank you so much, Trina.